Good morning. Welcome to Philly Youth Vote Candidate Interviews. We're interviewing our sixth of 6 Democratic candidates for PA Auditor General, running in the primary election on June 2nd. This Saturday, we are running a house party, an online house party with DJ Jazzy Jeff and DJ Diamond Cuts, Bobby Flowers, DJ Sophia, LGP Qua, and a bunch of other entertainment jumping on. And while they're doing all that music and entertainment, we're going to be registering other young people to vote. We're going to be checking to see if people have applied for their mail-in ballots, which is really important during the coronavirus epidemic. We just learned that 77% of polling places in Philadelphia are going to be closed and consolidated. So we want to make sure that we don't overcrowd those spaces and keep those poll workers safe and ourselves safe by voting by mail. So really important, and I'll talk more about that at the after the interview. And today we have Dr. Nina Ahmad, a Democratic candidate running for Auditor General. My students at Central High School are going to be interviewing her. This is my social science class, 7th period. Good morning, 7th period. So I'm going to go jump back over to the Google Meet here. Good morning, Dr. Ahmad.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you for coming. Really appreciate you talking to Philly public school students, making the connection they need to hear from politicians so that they can go to the polls and be more informed. So I'm going to send it right over to my students here. Thomas is going to start off with the first couple questions.
Hello, Dr. Ahmad. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So I was wondering, could you please tell us a little about your background, education, and experience?
Absolutely. So I don't know if all of you saw that little clip I put on before we started that tells you that, I came to this country as an immigrant. I lived through a war as a child. And the reason why that's important is that has shaped my worldview, my political views, to watch in 9 months, 3 million people were killed. People I knew were killed. 200,000 women and girls were brutalized as a tool of war. I learned 2 things. One, that people will make the ultimate sacrifice for freedom to be able to have their voice heard. And 2, that we need to level the playing field. Women and many other marginalized communities still don't have the same status in our world. So I became an advocate for women as a very young person. I still continue that advocacy. I used to be the president of the local chapter of the National Organization for Women, and now I actually serve on the national board. So when I came here, I got my bachelor's, and I waitressed through that time. I worked, and I know how difficult it is to manage and balance work and school. Many of you might be working, I don't know, already in high school. But we need to make that path much, much easier for our young people. And I went and got a PhD at the University of Pennsylvania in chemistry. I did a postdoc at Thomas Jefferson University. I was very lucky when I was doing my postdoc to identify a first mutation in a disease, an inherited disease that had eye and joint symptoms. It started in children all the way to seniors. And that actually got me a patent, which the university bought. I mean, I sold it to the university for $1, which means your intellectual property stayed with them. But what it did to me was really show me how information is power. Because when I shared that information with those families who were impacted by that, I saw a transformation in them. They not only were very glad to know that the parents weren't doing something wrong to have this disease in their children, but more importantly, they started organizing and organizing for more research into their disease and get more research dollars. So, and then from there, I actually went into public service because I saw that more people needed to have information in order to make their own decisions. And I served as deputy mayor in Philadelphia. I established the Office of Public Engagement. And the reason for setting that up was this is the first time we had an office like that, is to make sure when we have public policy, the people who are impacted most by it need to be at the table designing that along with the policymakers. And then I ran, and at the same time, while I was, coming along in my career, I was civically engaged. I was very honored to be appointed by President Obama to serve on a national commission, advisory commission, which was called Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. And I learned that representation matters when policy is made at a federal level. If you don't have people telling those policymakers what they need and how this policy will impact them, then you're silenced. And finally, I ran for office in 2018, and that election, it was a very short election, and we'll talk more about that later. And here I am today running for Auditor General for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Wow, that's incredible. Thank you very much. And I was wondering, could you please describe to us the responsibilities and powers of the Auditor General, and what about it makes you want to run and become the Auditor General?
Absolutely. So I will be the People's Auditor General, which means that I am your representative watching to make sure your tax dollars are used with integrity. And some of you might be already working and paying taxes. You want to make sure the taxes you pay that goes to the government and then is divvied out amongst the different departments to give you services back, right? And we want to make sure not only is that money used financially in a responsible manner, there's no theft, there's no malfeasance, there's internal controls are there to make sure the money is flowing the right way. And then also it's performing to the goals that were set for that money. That's actually really important, that implementation of, say, a law that came out and the departments are actually implementing that. And I'll give you examples along the way of what that looks like. So having that responsibility is really important to make sure your money is used properly. I am actually, as a scientist, really interested in looking at this office. Every time we do an audit, that we go into a department, collect all this information, look at their balance sheets, look at all of these things, and make sure they're doing everything correctly. We're also collecting data around issues. I want to really look at how are your tax dollars through our budget process being used with equity, transparency, and accountability. So that equity is really important to me. As I just told you, my life experience has told me that people can be silenced, and budgets are a moral document. So who stays in and who is left out in a budget is really important. As I said, I was deputy mayor, and during that time, as part of the cabinet, I had to make efficiencies in on over a $4 billion budget, along with my other colleagues. And that's when I saw how were decisions made about where those dollars were going. So that's very important to me, why I want to do this job. Because at the end of the day, I want to make sure that every Pennsylvanian has a fighting chance to lead the life that they want to lead. And that I believe that a government is supposed to do public good. And my hashtag is leave no one behind. So when you combine public good with leave no one behind, I hope everybody is covered by that. So, so those are the fundamental duties: financial audits, performance audits, and we call something called attestations, which means we give our opinion on a third party's work that we can say, yes, they're reliable, they're good, and other people can use them. But it is much more than that. It is actually a progressive platform that I want to use to make sure that all of you, everyone in your school, everyone in my life has access to resources and they can drive their own destiny.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Dr. Ahmad, my name's Joe.
Hi, Joe.
I wanted to ask, what can you do to ensure that as a city and as a state, we're ready for a round two of COVID-19 or any other disease or disaster with similar closures that we're currently facing?
That's a great question. As a biomedical scientist, I am making the first priority, if I were to be your Auditor General, to design a pandemic preparedness audit. So what you're facing now, you shouldn't be facing if we had a preparedness plan in place. First of all, the federal government, I believe, has failed us. One of the first things the current president did was dismantle the pandemic unit that was part of the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control. And that is why you're seeing so much dysfunction happen, which is trickling down to our states, of course. I think our governor and our Secretary of Health is doing a fantastic job keeping us informed, making the best decisions based on evidence. However, they are handicapped by not having a great plan in place where we would have multiple facets to it. So if I were to design this pandemic preparedness audit, I would have not just health professionals, frontline health workers. I'd have students. Students need to be at that table, that committee that helps shape that audit, because your lives have been disrupted probably more than anyone else's. Your graduations are impacted, your class time is impacted. So not only will we have economic piece to it, education piece to it, but a health piece to it, we need to be ready, and we need to be checking that pandemic plan yearly. As a scientist, I'll tell you, we're going to have more pandemics because we are such a small world now, and we travel everywhere. We spread disease very fast. So we have to be aware of that. And the current Auditor General actually has already said he will do an audit of how the Department of Community and Economic Development decided what was going to be closed and what was going to be open in terms of businesses. He's looking at why nursing homes were impacted so much. All of this should be built into a pandemic audit, a pre-audit, meaning not after the fact, but we're already ready before the fact. So these are some of the ways I look to make sure I bring all my skill set to address the needs of Pennsylvanians.
Thank you for that reassuring answer. We really need that during this time.
Yeah.
Our next question is about schools. So as PA taxpayers pay $18 million a year for Keystone exams that high school students take every year. So what is your stance on standardized tests? Do you feel these tests provide a racial disadvantage or advantage? And do you believe they're necessary?
So I have very strong feelings about standardized tests because where I went to school, we had no standardized tests. We were assessed on our work through the year, right? And I understand the value that we must have something that everybody participates in so we can assess the readiness for you to move on to the next level. But teaching to the test is a real problem. We need to have reform in our education system, that it is much more project-based learning, because we all have different styles of learning and we must accommodate all those styles. Some people are more visual, some people are auditory, some people are tactile, some people are all of those. And we must give our teachers and our educational system the flexibility to accommodate all of you. And I think when you have standardized testing, that really doesn't allow that to happen. So while I understand the need for some of that, I think we need to really radically change what that looks like. And number two, it's become a real business to actually administer those tests and drive those tests outside of just the Keystone. Then you have the SATs and all of that. A lot of colleges are dropping it now. In fact, the California system, the Janet DiNapoli, who's there now, has said she's going to do away with SATs and other standardized testing. So I think the country's at a place, if we were to have a really innovative next administration who would use the Department of Education to really set the tone about how we create students, how we build students' curiosity, make them more innovative, allow them to make some mistakes and not have that say, oh my God, I'm going to get a C or a D and that's going to, end my life plans. We need to get away from that. So I feel very strongly that we need to have an education system that allows your creativity and innovation to come through.
Thank you.
Hello. Sorry, back to me again. And we were wondering, how important is student safety in the communities they go to school in? How would you go about making communities safer for students who perhaps walk or bike to school?
Right. Public safety is a really big issue. You know, all students, but particularly young women students, face a lot of harassment just walking on the street, you know, just going from one place to another. I have two daughters. One is college, second year in college, and the other one has graduated and actually lives in New York and is very engaged in this issue. She volunteers for, she's a frontline worker when somebody is assaulted. She goes to the hospital, she's their advocate. So this is a really important issue about public safety for everyone. And because of my role in the National Organization for Women, we have been working really hard to look at how we make sure everybody is safe. So I feel strongly that we need to, as a state, look at how we change our environments. So, and I'm just very blunt. I say end rape culture. I'm just about saying ending rape culture, which means the continuum, whether it's harassment on the street or it's actual assault, all the way along. And this is not just for women. This is for, you know, our trans women, our LGBT community, our immigrants who might not know language, get harassed in stores. All of these things add to creating an environment where people are held accountable when they, you know, do this to other people. But moreover, to have communities that are safe and support each other, and most importantly, our students. So I would like to see the Auditor General's office actually assessing public safety, whether, you know, a lot of schools have metal detectors and all of that. I can't imagine going to school in such a stressful environment and then having to learn and then having to actually sit for some of these standardized tests. So we need to make the schools safe. We need to make our students feel safe. We need to look at things such as proliferation of guns, and I'll come to that later maybe. All of those things add together to assess how healthy are we. This is creating a healthy environment. So yes, this is of much importance to me, but I would take your input. I would sit down with all of you who actually experience this to think of the best solutions. As I said, public policy without input for people who are impacted is really not sustainable. So I would hope you would be partners with me going forward if I were to be so lucky as to be your next Auditor General to address this very critical issue.
That sounds absolutely fantastic and very reassuring. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Dr. Ahmad. My name is Ariana, and I have a few questions.
All right, Ariana, go for them.
So first is, what will you do to provide more resources for students' mental health?
Yes. So, you know, that is critical. Healthcare in general. I believe healthcare is a human right. I believe that everybody should have access to it, regardless of, you know, what your financial status is. Children, when you're born into a family, didn't decide I was going to be born in a rich family or a poor family. So you cannot handicap someone with not giving them healthcare to start off with. You know, none of what we're doing now, talking, you know, going to school, none of this would happen if you're not healthy. So that's a fundamental right. And that includes mental health. As I said before, your generation is under so much stress, under so much input from around you. You are the technology generation who are constantly bombarded by messages. And it's, you know, there's so much fake news out there. There's so much happening that to keep your head straight, you really need a place to be able to unload all this. So this is why having counselors in school is really important, not just one for 500 people, but multiple ones who can really address the needs and know the children, know people as you're going through school. So one look at your face will tell me, you know, something's not right. And and even the level of what's not right, because I know you, right? So it's important we have schools with enough resources so that our teachers, our academic, and our staff know children, so that they're part of the family that each school should be. So that's one. Two is mental health in general, not just for students, but for everyone, is critical. I don't know if you know the stats that gun violence, the gun deaths of our whole gun violence issue, 60% come from self-harm, come from suicide. And of that, it's mostly middle-aged, white, from men from rural counties. So that really points to we have some dysfunction where people are not able to get the resources and help they need to address their mental health needs. So yes, I think that's critical. And as an Auditor General, I can really use that office to show the data around these issues and then say it's actually cost efficient, not just compassionate, to have public policy that includes healthcare and mental health care for all.
Thank you so much for that answer. So going back to the topic of schools, what will you do to make sure Pennsylvania schools are fairly funded so that Philly students can get an education equal to students living in like wealthier suburbs?
Absolutely. Well, that's a really important question. One, because all of you are our future. And if we don't prepare all of you with the best skill set, with all the tools you need to go into this brave new world, we're doing ourselves a disservice. So in a long-term fashion, investment in our young people is cost efficient. So how do we invest in you? By having education. Our education right now is lopsided in how much money comes from the state. It's about 36 to 38%. And the rest is made up from the local municipality, taxes that they collect. And that the main chunk of it comes from property taxes. So as you just mentioned, property value decides how much resources are going to be available. So we need to change that model. That's a big issue. And I think we need the state to make you a priority. So in their budget, they have a much bigger chunk of the school district's budget that they provide, because then we won't have it dependent on the quality of housing that you have in your neighborhood, right? So then the second thing is we have a fair formula fund in place. The governor actually passed that. But the problem with that was only new monies that came into a school budget would be subject to that fair formula fund, not the money that was already in the budget before. So that meant a very small percentage of the school dollars were going through that, which is much more equitable distribution. So the formula fund has many factors in it. So if a school district has, say, for example, a lot of English learners, there'll be a different they'll be normalized to that factor. If there's a lot of special ed students, then you'll have that being weighted into how much comes to the school district. But if you're only 6 to 10% of the budget is going through that, you're not really addressing the rest of it. So we need, again, the Auditor General would be working with the legislature and will be working with the rest of the executive branch. The Auditor General is part of the executive branch, along with the governor, the treasurer, and the attorney general. And I would be working with all of these folks, but also with the legislature and with the public to say, here, this is how we could be more equitable in how our school, education dollars are distributed. Not only will you folks are very active and politically savvy, you should have that information. I should be sitting down with my audit report, which we do for the school districts. We do those audit reports. Come down and sit down with you and tell you where the money is going, how much is it coming from where, and what are the outcomes. And the outcomes are you. If you have a solid education, have the skill set to go ahead, whether you want to go a vocational track or you want to go the college track, and there should be flexibility to go from one to another. You're the proof to say our education dollars are being used well or not. So I definitely think it's one of our very important issues facing the state of Pennsylvania, and we need to change that allocation to a much higher allocation from the state.
Again, thank you so much for that answer. It was very reassuring. And finally, from me, just to switch gears a little bit, what is a fun fact about you that you would like to share with us?
Fun fact. Oh my God. I like to have fun. I have, as I said, two girls, and my husband and I, and we do a lot of our conversations, arguing. We're all very politically engaged in our family. So right now, everybody's different places, college and post-college, but when we get together, and as children, they always helped us to cook. They would cut vegetables, they would do things. And so right now, our second daughter, who's the college student, she's home, and she has, out of boredom, just cooking up a storm. And so we are really enjoying good food. So that's one. I love to cook. I love to eat. I love to travel. But I have a fun fact about me as a child. One of my passions are animals. I love animals. We have a rescue dog. We've always had rescue dogs. As a child, I raised a chicken. It was my little pet chicken. Her name was Priscilla. She was a little red hen. And unbeknownst to my mother, I would bring her inside the house. She was supposed to be outside. We lived in Bangladesh. It's a warm climate. They had their own little chicken coop. But I would bring her in a little box with a little net on, and then she would poop everywhere. And I was cleaning up poop, and which I would never want to clean normally, but just to keep my Priscilla with me, she would be under my bed, and no one would know that. So I was, at that time in my life, I didn't have a dog. I was desperately wanting a dog, so I made Priscilla my dog. Literally, she would follow me around. And there's another quick story about why chickens are very important in my brain. As I told you, I lived through the war, and as a young girl, because girls were being attacked by the military, my mother cut my hair, put me in shorts and t-shirt, and then she told me an escape route if the military came banging down our door, which they were doing. So it was in the backyard where the chickens actually laid their eggs in the coop, very dirty and smelly. I was supposed to go into there anytime, if they came in. So every night I would lie in bed and I would hear these leaves crackling, maybe a cat or something was walking by. And I would think, this is it, and I have to go to the backyard. So chickens are sort of in my head a safe space, and Priscilla was part of that safe space for me.
Thank you for sharing that cool story. So I'll say thank you again for taking time to speaking with us. And our last question is, why is it so important for young people to vote?
Oh my goodness. First of all, I want to say you have a hero as your teacher who has advocated to make sure all of you are able to vote by mail in this election. I know there have been some issues with what documents you need. And Mr. Quinn has been front and center even before this. I know there was a brouhaha, and all of you stood by him. So I want to thank Central High School for the student body, the parents, all for fighting for justice and fighting for freedom. So you did that already. So you're fully engaged in understanding that your voice matters. Elections have been settled by as close as one vote. In Virginia, this happened not too long ago for a state level election. So it matters. Every vote counts. And going back to the sacrifice people have made, I was able to be the first Asian American to be in a Philadelphia cabinet. It is because people fought for civil rights here. I stand on the shoulders of all who have sacrificed before me. So do you. So it honors everyone who has fought for your right to have a voice. So that's why you should vote, just to honor them. Two, because information is power. So if you're an informed voter, you get to decide what policies are going to impact you, because that's what legislators are going to do. People you elect, like me, in state level offices are going to do, your local elections. All of those are important, but being informed about that. And lastly, it is about you being a democratic unit in our country. You are the future. you're going to be the leaders. You're going to decide what the shape of this country and the direction of the country is going to be in the next few years. Some of you are already very engaged. Soon I'll be hearing you're running for office, or you're doing some fantastic things, discovering new things in science and technology, writing books about our history. So many ways you impact us. So your voice in that voting booth is just as important as my voice or someone much older, right? So I hope all of you are going to exercise, those you can, who are eligible to vote. Will go out, go online, get your ballot, or because we're, as Mr. Quinn said, that polling stations are much reduced. Maybe participate in helping out in the polling stations if you can that day, to help be poll workers. I don't know what the process might be. Contact the Board of Elections. It is really critical that all of you be engaged and be informed. So what Mr. Quinn is doing, putting us all in front of you, looking to see who will have your best interest at heart, who is actually talking about the things that impact you, and then how is it a more global issue of, are they going to be the people who bring the values that will make sure that, as I say, no one is left behind. So that's why I hope, and every one of you who can vote will vote, and you'll encourage, even if you're not able to vote, there's so many other ways to help out. If you like a candidate, get involved with the campaign, do phone banking for them, go on social media, share their posts. My social media, my website is ninaforpa.com. I'm on Facebook, public Facebook. I'm on Instagram @ninaforpa. I'm on Twitter, Nina Ahmed, PHL. So multiple ways. If you go to my website, you'll find all these ways you can contact me. Also, we didn't get a real chance to talk back and forth today. If any of you have any questions, and I'm extremely responsive, feel free to email me at info@ninaforpa.com. info, I-N-F-O, @ninaforpa.com. After I finish this call, there's a voter who asked me a bunch of questions. I'm going to finish writing to him. He had some specific questions about farms and rural subsidies. I'm going to sit down and answer him. So I will assure you, I will answer your questions if you have any.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you coming and talking to my students, my wonderful students. I had great questions for you, and I thank you for answering them all. And I want to wish you the best luck in your campaign. Do you want to say last few words before we sign off here?
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you for having me. Thank you for your interest. Central High has a long and storied history. You guys were the second public school, I believe, in the country. But you have a mantle to carry, so please make sure you reach out and help someone behind you who might be struggling a little bit more than you. Be that person who can open some doors. If we all did that, we would be a better society. That's one. Two, I hope you'll consider, those of you who can vote for me, consider casting your vote for me if you're happy with what you heard. I didn't have time to give you a lot of examples, things like maternal mortality, where 3.5 Black women are dying for white women, and all women are dying more at childbirth. Issues like that, how the Auditor General can impact. There's a myriad of ways the Auditor General can be impactful in your life. And I intend to be that Auditor General who looks through all of this. And then finally, I hope you'll encourage your families and everybody in your network to be engaged, to be informed, and cast your vote. Thank you very much, and stay safe.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmad. You have a great day.
You too. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I'm going to just go over now and just close up with just a couple slides about registering to vote. We just heard from Dr. Nina Ahmad, Democratic candidate for PA Auditor General, interviewed by my students at Central High School. And if you need to register to vote, please make sure you do that before May 18th is the deadline to register to vote. And if you're already registered, please, please, please apply to vote by mail. It's a two-step process. You apply for the mail-in ballot. The commissioners will send it to you and then send the ballot to you. You fill out the ballot, you mail that back in. Postage is paid, so it's really important because the polling places are going to be very crowded and understaffed on June 2nd because they're shutting so many of them down. And if you want to get involved in helping to register other youth to vote, please join up with Philly Youth Vote and Vote That John, or When We All Vote. And Vote That John is putting on a house party this Saturday night. If you're interested in helping to text other youth around the city to get them to register to vote and to get those mail-in ballots, join us. We're doing it to music with DJ Jazzy Jeff and a bunch of other local DJs. It's going to be fun, and we're going to get a lot of people to the polls. We're hoping this Saturday evening, 5 to 8. Okay, so thank you for joining us, students. Thank you for those questions. Did a wonderful job, and have a great day.